So now I'm really thrilled to welcome Machi Jadema, who's a global strategy and business development lead at WhatsApp, to discuss what this year has meant for WhatsApp in terms of its engagement with the global development community. So when we talk about innovating at scale, one thing that organizations have had to adjust to this year is meeting needs from a distance and incorporating feedback from a distance and doing their day-to-day work from a distance. And as organizations try to figure out how to do that, one of the key takeaways I've been hearing is meet people where they are. WhatsApp has a huge user base. So when it comes to meeting people where they are, WhatsApp is often the natural choice. A lot of organizations have gone to WhatsApp to communicate with their stakeholders, to communicate with the people they aim to serve. And there's some really interesting technology solutions emerging in terms of use of artificial intelligence and chatbots. Some may say that innovation in this space has actually been accelerated by COVID-19, even though there is a lot that is lost without that in-person interaction. So Machi, just really thrilled to have you here to tell us a little bit more about what this year has been like for WhatsApp and what some of your advice is for the global development community about ways to engage with messaging apps for development. So let's just start there. How has demand for WhatsApp increased this year? And what has that looked like for your work in terms of being that point of contact for the global development community?
Thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to start off by saying, obviously this year has been incredibly challenging for everyone in every corner of the world. It's also been a very humbling year for us at WhatsApp. As you mentioned, we have over 2 billion monthly active users, around the world. It's a humbling statistic. But I think what we learned during the pandemic times is the genuine hunger people around the world have for authoritative sources of information. And today, or at least before COVID, people traditionally went to websites or went to whatever platforms they were congregating on with their family and friends. But what we found out was that we had a unique opportunity to bring that experience within a messaging context and within the messaging form factor, so that the 2 billion people who are actively using WhatsApp on a regular basis can also tap into that information, share it with their family and friends, especially in a scenario where we're having what a lot of people call an infodemic. How do you know what's real? How do you know what's true? And so that was a genuine way for us to really connect with the right set of organizations within the global development community. They've been fantastic to work with. And it's just been honestly a genuine honor to be able to fill that gap and provide accurate information to people at scale.
Thank you. Now, one of the organizations that you have partnered with is the World Health Organization. So can you tell me a little bit more about how that partnership came together and what that looked like? I know when you mentioned this infodemic, that's one of the big challenges for the WHO is just managing information, getting information out to people, ensuring that the truth rises above all of the misinformation that is swirling around on these platforms. So how did that partnership with the WHO come together? And can you tell us a little bit more about the health alert, which is on WhatsApp?
Definitely happy to talk about that. So, I believe at the height of when the pandemic hit and it was clear that this was a unique moment in time, it's kind of towards the end of February and early March. That's when economies were shutting down. That's when it became clear that this was a unique point in history. We got clear mandates across the entire organization that we really needed to come together to see what we could do, what small part we can play in being a part of the solution. Coincidentally, at the time, the WHO was also thinking through, what digital platforms around the world can they leverage to get out information at scale. They had been leveraging their websites and other channels, but they were also kind of thinking at the time, what would this look like, within a mobile experience? What are the key platforms that can help them get the word out in as an efficient manner as possible? So thankfully, we were thinking about that. At the same time, Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the organization, was also planning to meet a number of tech CEOs, one of which was Mark. So he ended up having a meeting with Mark and Cheryl. And one of the agenda items that he wanted to talk through was, how can we leverage platforms like WhatsApp to get out this information at scale? The vision was there. It wasn't kind of clear what the mechanics could look like, but it was just kind of a great conversation point. Because at the time, a lot of people were in panic. People didn't know where to go for what. We were all scared. And so it was a great conversation. And coming out of that discussion, we just kind of came together across WhatsApp, Facebook, and the WHO, put our heads together. And we're like, hey, listen, at least on the WhatsApp side, we're hugely supportive. We have an ecosystem of partners who do this on the business side. This would be the first time we're doing it at this scale with an intergovernmental organization like the WHO, but we're very willing and happy to see what we can do. And so the WHO took a look at our partner ecosystem. Luckily for us, we did have one partner who had significant expertise in terms of working with health ministries, working in health, with health systems, and helping orchestrate health programs, breakout.org. And so they ultimately selected them. And ever since then, we've been working together on multiple use cases. So at the onset, we worked on providing basic information at scale, leveraging AI, hugely successful. We were able to reach over 10 million people within 3 days of launch, over 1 million people before we even actually launched formally. And since then, we've sent tens of millions of messages to people around the world. In October, to celebrate World Mental Health Day, we launched a mental health resource within the solution. I'm incredibly proud of that resource because I think one of the things that we've since learned is separate from the actual virus, there are all these kind of other aspects that we need to kind of keep in mind, people's mental health and their well-being. And so we've just been iterating and continuing to build upon the core solution to make sure it's useful for everyone.
Thanks for that. Now I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of people who might be tuning into this conversation, and when they think about how they might want to use WhatsApp or other messaging apps in their work, they aren't necessarily going to be able to get on the phone with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg as Dr. Tedros was able to do. Maybe they work for a smaller NGO, for example. And so I'm just curious just to hear a little bit more about your role and how you work with groups like PreKelt, for example. I'm sure there's a lot of inbound demand, especially during COVID-19, when a lot of groups are taking their work to messaging apps. Mm-hmm. So how can organizations engage with your technology? And you mentioned AI earlier. This doesn't just mean sending individual messages on WhatsApp. This is really leveraging the platform alongside other technologies like automation.
What a great question. So I think one of the things we learned from working with the WHO, UNICEF, and other important organizations around the world, as well as even NGOs, was the role we can play in driving social impact broadly. I think we knew, but to your point about COVID accelerating the digital transformation of these international institutions and NGOs who are playing a critical role in this pandemic time, it really opened our eyes to what's possible and the unique opportunity to drive a lot of impact and social good in the world going forward. So you're right, we've seen a lot of inbound. And one of the things we're thinking about right now is, how can we actually generally serve this community at scale? Whether, you're a smaller NGO in a place like Bangladesh, or you're a well-known international organization based in Washington, D.C., how can we programmatically think about this ecosystem and provide the tooling and support that's needed to serve communities at scale? So it's something that we're carefully thinking about. I think the good news is for the Business API, which is the solution that we're officially using to drive this impact, we do have an ecosystem of about 100 partners. Some are more specialized than others. So some, like I mentioned, have a lot of expertise in health or social good, but we also have more general partners who do good work on the business side, who could also facilitate this work for NGOs to the extent that they're interested.
So sticking on this Business API for a second, which, if I understand it, is the solution that you're adapting for NGO partners to use as well. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially a way to use WhatsApp to reach communities at scale. Mm-hmm. Often that is through the use of chatbots, artificial intelligence, automation. I want to discuss what your challenges have been and some limitations. So for example, as I understand it, when I did a story on how the WHO and WhatsApp are partnering, mm-hmm. I signed up for the WHO Health Alert, naturally, to see how it worked. And one of the things I learned, and I know one of the key challenges, is you have to opt into information. The WHO does not have the option to send push notifications. So as new information comes in on COVID-19, they can't notify me, even though I signed up for the WHO Health Alert. And that kind of comes back to some of the challenges you must face and some of the tensions in your work because of the purpose WhatsApp was created for versus the purpose you are now serving in your work with NGOs. So can you talk about that a little bit? What are some things you can't do, or maybe you're trying to figure out if it might be possible, but there are some constraints?
Great question. So, one of the reasons why WhatsApp has been so powerful, at least based on our research and the consumer side, is the fact that it's simple, it's personal, and it's private. So I think as we start to work with businesses and international organizations and NGOs, we want to make sure that we stay true to that promise. You raise a good point where, we're thinking about the trade-offs around how do we facilitate this work, but do it in a way that continues to be meaningful to people and doesn't overwhelm them. And then how do we do it in a way that, they can kind of gradually ease into the experience and be comfortable in an environment where, instead of just talking to people who are their family and friends, it's also businesses or NGOs who are providing important services in their day-to-day activities. So it's something we're thinking carefully about. We're looking, as we speak, we're actually looking at our policies to see how we can best facilitate some of these high quality interactions. I think in the health space, it's incredibly valuable as a use case because we're thinking about how to save people's lives, especially in an important time like this. So it's something that we're thinking very carefully about. We're making some adjustments where it makes sense, but we want to be careful to make sure it's the highest quality use case so that people don't get overwhelmed in their chats. We're also constantly investing in tools and features that make the experience more and more engaging. We're looking at, other policies. You talked about opt-in, very important to us. We want to make sure people are not surprised by messages. And so one of our requirements is, hey, before you send out an unsolicited message, make sure you have the opt-in. It can be within WhatsApp, it can be off of WhatsApp, but we just want to be really, really careful about that because we value the trust people have in the platform. We want to make sure that we maintain that trust going forward as we continue to work with these organizations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm struck by, I'm just reflecting on something someone from actually Sesame Workshop said about their use of WhatsApp. And this was in a past Devex story, but he mentioned it's not about spamming communities, right? And yes, you have the opportunity for broad reach with WhatsApp, but you still have to build those trusted relationships. You still have to have a way to measure success. A lot of the same dynamics at play in person translate digitally. So I'd love to ask for any advice you have. I hope that people tuning into this conversation can walk away with not only a sense of how messaging has kind of become front and center to a lot of this work this year, but practical insights they can apply to their work about how to engage with messaging in WhatsApp or how to engage with big tech more broadly. There aren't a lot of people in roles like yours with a mandate to engage with this community. So what advice do you have for organizations trying to figure out how to leverage perhaps WhatsApp or other tech platforms during this crisis?
Great question. I wanted to start off by saying that we're in learning mode, so we're taking a very humble approach as we engage more and more with the community. So one of our biggest asks would be, hey, we're looking to learn as much as possible. We have an ecosystem of partners who can get you up and running. You'll probably hear more and more from us in the next year about ways in which we're looking to do that at scale. So please, to the extent that you're able to share feedback, share use cases and sectors that we might not even be thinking about, we're really looking to learn as much as possible. So rest assured, we're taking a learner's mindset here and we're looking to get as much feedback from the community. So just kind of wanted to start off with that. The second piece I wanted to anchor on is just kind of sharing a little bit more about our product vision. The reason why as an organization we're investing so much in this with the NGO community as well as with businesses is because fundamentally we're seeing a digital transformation take place within call centers and with businesses and organizations overall moving to messaging platforms to communicate with people at scale. So for example, I'll give a specific example. When COVID hit, a lot of people around the world were dialing into health centers in their individual countries, and a lot of them were swamped. So like you would call and you might be on hold for hours and maybe you might not even be able to reach someone. And so the critical gap that we're filling in the marketplace is making sure that people are able to use WhatsApp as that platform. We're starting with text now and rich experiences within a text-based environment, but imagine a world where you're able to do similar things that you're doing within a phone context within WhatsApp in a way that's rich, immersive, and engaging. And so I think it's a fundamental digital transformation opportunity that we're looking to tap into with businesses, and a role we're looking to fulfill in the social impact space to make sure that we're making sure that people are able to continue to talk to people at scale, even if they're not able to reach them on the phone. They're able to leverage AI tools, they're able to link them up with agents, and they're able to kind of serve their needs in a way that's fun, engaging, and scalable. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish here. We want to be as accessible as possible, which is why we've created our partner ecosystem. So definitely encourage you to look it up. We actually have it online. It's quite visible. If you search for WhatsApp Business Solution Providers, the landing page should come up. And you can engage with any one of those partners or folks who have vertical expertise. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to doing more and more in this space over the coming years.
Thank you, Machi. Well, I believe we're at time, and I know we have a lot to get to in our programming today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know you mentioned that we'll be seeing more of you in the next year. So I hope you will keep us updated on your learning journey at WhatsApp and continue to keep in touch with the Devex community as you work to engage with global development professionals. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Catherine.